So I'm here tonight talking to Debbie Consani. Needs little introduction to most of you, but just to run through a few stats in case there's anyone in this ultra community hasn't heard of Debbie Consani. She is one of Great Britain's top ultra runners in a nutshell. She's run for Scotland at 100K on the road. She's run for Great Britain at 24 hours and is a former 24-hour record holder. She's also had victories in races like the Lakeland 100, as well as taking part in little things like the UTMB, the Tour de Géants, and a little race beginning with S, which goes up the Pennine Way. And I think everyone has heard about that the last few weeks. But we're here tonight to talk about the West Highland Way and Debbie's West Highland Way experiences and how you, sitting at home listening to this, can prepare for your own West Highland Way or your own 50-mile, 100-mile adventures this summer, or any time you happen to be looking at this in the future. So Debbie, you have run the West Highland Way on 3 occasions, correct?
I have, yes.
Yes. First time, look at my stats, was back in 2008 when you ran a little over 30 hours. That was quite a long one.
Yeah, that was the one where I didn't know I was 10 weeks pregnant. So maybe we should first discourage people from trying it if they... yeah, so it was a long haul. I had to walk from Tyndrum, but I was adamant I wanted to finish on the basis that I'd bought the West Highland Way hoodie and I wanted to wear it. So I know it sounds really arbitrary in the cold light of day, but yeah, that's why I wanted to finish it. It was not a pleasant experience. My body was telling me not to go on. But yeah, and then I went back 2 years later. So Karen was born in the 2009. So I think I went back in 2010 and got a nice 10-hour PB.
In 2010, Debbie did 20 hours and 58 minutes.
Yeah.
And you then weren't even happy with that. You came back for more the following year and improved by another hour.
Yeah.
Imagine a 20-hour barrier, 19 hours, 39 minutes, and 57 seconds.
Yeah.
So briefly, Debbie, what in the first place, for people listening to this who just heard about the West Highland Way, but just think it's just some crazy bandpot idea, what inspired you to do the West Highland Way in the first place?
Yeah, my first ultra was, I started running like 20 years ago, and so I'd done some big city marathons and I really enjoyed that experience, and I started bagging some Monroes. So I really loved being out on the hills and out on the trails. I loved running as well, but I wanted to find something that combined both those. And that's when I stumbled across the website for the Devil of the Highlands. I think back in 2008, there wasn't the array of ultra races there is now. There was quite a select few. So I did the Devil of the Highlands in 2006. I want to say 2007. And after I'd finished that, thanks, Adrian, thanks. After I'd finished that, I just, the Devils was going to be my one and only ultra. That was one of those things that I just wanted to do, to experience it. I loved it. I loved the camaraderie. I loved being out on the trails. I loved being out by yourself and having your own little personal challenge. So I signed up for the West Highland Way Race. I was terrified. I remember driving to Mogai and I was just like, I had no idea what was in store or how it was going to unfold or what was going to happen. But yeah, I think I was just inspired by being out on the West Highland Way on the Devil's course. And yeah, it was just huge. I remember Marco, my husband, and I were sitting in Starbucks in Buchanan Street, and Ian Beattie walked by, and Marco used to work with Ian, and he just like, see that guy there? He's run the West Highland Way. And I was like, it's ridiculous. That's actually impossible. Don't talk rubbish. So yeah, I guess that seed was planted, and yeah, I wanted to go and give it a go. And I think anyone who's run the West Highland Way or any of the races on the West Highland Way will soon get sucked in. So I've done the West Highland Way 3 times. I think I've done the Fling 3 or 4 times, and I've done the Devils 5. I haven't done them for a few years because I think in all 3 races I ran times where I was just really happy and content with. But I've always been involved in all the races, and I will probably continue to be involved in them, whether I'm supporting or volunteering or crewing. It's just a wonderful experience, and I think anyone who's going to experience it for the first time, I'm actually quite jealous.
I think your feelings of trepidation heading for the start line for the first time will probably be shared by many. I know I had it my first time. I had never even set foot on the West Highland Way the first time I ran it. I was a complete newbie to the whole trail. But that'll be echoed by a lot of people this year, especially the first timers listening to this. Now, here we are, believe it or not, just 13 weeks, 3 months, or even 91 days away from this year's race. Midsummer seems a long way away, but it will come very quickly. Now, assuming winter has gone well for everyone training for it, and they haven't had any injuries, they've avoided the dreaded COVID, and they've got their big base of mileage there over the winter, which is usually the goal number 1. How can runners maximize this next 8 weeks and consolidate what they've done so far just to get on that start line in the best shape?
Follow a structured planning plan. Consistency is always key when it comes to these things. Don't leave it too late and panic train, because the worst thing you could do is turn up and start line overtrained. Get in some good consistent long runs at the weekend. Don't overdo it. Don't do masses of long back-to-back runs. I think I used to do that back in the day when everyone thought it was the bread and butter of ultra running. Get out on the trail if you can. Being out in the course and knowing what's ahead, especially if you're running sections in the dark. Checking all your kit, make sure you've got all your kit properly, testing your foods, your nutrition, your shoes, everything, briefing your crew, making sure everyone's on board with things, giving your crew like worst and best case scenario, and things that you can work through on the day. And then just give yourself a good time to taper down. Don't overcook it. You're better turning up a little bit undertrained than overtrained.
That's all good stuff. Now, you mentioned the conundrum of doing long back-to-back runs. Obviously, everyone is different, but in your opinion, what is the difference between doing back-to-back runs on a weekend, or say doing a speed session or a race on the Saturday followed by a long run on the Sunday, or vice versa? How is it best to mix it up, or is it just something everyone has to just try themselves and see what works for them?
Yeah, I guess everyone's lifestyle is different. You've got to factor in family, work, commute, all those other things, and the amount of stress that you're already under before you start layering in some training and long runs. Everyone's training plan is completely different, so I'm not going to give a one size fits all, and what works for me will not work for you or John or anyone else running it. So I would just stick to kind of your normal training plan during the week. Sometimes even adding in like a double day somewhere in there is quite good, so you're running a little bit tireder in the evening. I wouldn't say no back-to-back long runs, but I wouldn't do too many of them. Like now I probably do like 1 or 2 a year, but I'll do like long back-to-backs at the weekend. But I would still do like a long run on a Saturday and a shorter recovery run on a Sunday, rather than back in the day where I used to do like 30, 40 miles on a Saturday and then I'd go out and do 20 on a Sunday, and now I don't even know how I did that. But yeah, I think you've just got to take in various factors. There's a lot of other things. And then if you're doing other sports or other activities as well, there's a lot of things to take into consideration.
Yeah. And for people you're obviously towards the sharp end and probably running most of it. For mere mortals who are perhaps going to be taking 25, 27, 30 hours and plus, they'll be doing a bit of walking. Is it a bad idea just to go and do a day in the hills and bag 2 or 3 Monroes as part of the
absolutely. Just to say that, I have run a 19-hour West Highland Way, but I've also done a 30-hour one, and I can tell you which one is a lot harder. But yeah, even in like a 19-hour, there's still a lot of walking sections in there. Like I probably wouldn't run that many hills. So yeah, getting out in the hills and just like doing hikes, going back to that back-to-back. So you'd be better off doing a long run on a Saturday and maybe doing a hike or a walk on a Sunday. So you're taking away that impact, but you're still building a really good endurance base. But yeah, walking and hiking is, fast, brisk walking is really important. I know, like, my normal day-to-day, like, I don't walk anywhere. I either run or I drive. So having to go and just putting in some walking as well, like long days on the hills as well, would be way more beneficial than doing long back-to-backs.
And obviously, most people think of the actual race as going fairly slowly, consistently. Do you, or did you, when you were doing faster, shorter races, other 100 miles, let alone all these multi-day things you're doing these days, how important, or where did any sort of speed work or resistance work fit into a schedule?
Yeah, I mean, I would still always do like probably at least 2 speed sessions a week, maybe just 1. So I would do like intervals or tempos and then a hill session. I think gone are the days when people just transitioned into ultra running and it just became long, slow runs. It just makes you slow plodder. So I think if you want to have that zip, and especially in the latter stages when you do get tired, just having that in the bank makes such a difference. And even doing like intervals, tempos, hill sessions, it just makes your overall cruising pace that little bit swifter. So I think it's really important. I think, you know, ultra running is still relatively new sport and people are learning and adapting and all the time. I mean, you've been around, Adrian, you've seen how ultra running has massively changed over the last 10, 20, 30 years. And, you know, even for like something like the Fling or the West Highland Way, even having that during the week where you're following like a marathon or a 50-mile training plan, so you've still got some intensity in there and it's not just plodding out long slow runs, which can be quite boring, let's be honest. So it's actually really good just to mix up your training because the terrain is so mixed on the West Highland Way as well. So there's going to be some good fast downhills, there's going to be a lot of runnable sections, you know, you've got that technical stuff on the lock side, you know, you've got some nice good hikes up the Devils or Conic or coming out of Kinlochleven. So you do really need to mix up your training because there's so much of a mixed terrain and a lot of different muscles that you'll be using going along the West Highland Way.
And in terms of racing, I remember chatting with Charlie Ramsey of Ramsey Round fame. Those of you who aren't familiar with the Ramsey Round, just check out ramseyround.com to find out what a little adventure that is. But when he was training for like a big Ramsey Round, sort of midsummer, or encouraging other people to train for it, he would always swear by putting in some shorter hill races come sort of March, April, early May. Might even just be very short ones because it wasn't very fast, but he just wanted that feeling of just having someone clipping at your heels, being able to catch someone in front of you, just to develop the mindset of, yes, I'm in a race. I'm not just doing a training run now. I'm actually competitive. Do little races like that figure in your plans?
Yeah, sometimes if I'm brave enough to do it. I've been known to try to throw in a park run and I'll run down there and then run around the park and run back because I've just chickened out. Yeah, no, it's really good. So those shorter races, you're basically working at your maximum effort and you're getting that fatigue at the end and just training your body to keep going when it's absolutely ruined towards the end of a race. And it doesn't matter how hard you hit the West Highland Way, whether you're doing it in 15 hours or 30 hours, you're still going to be like super tired toward the end and you're still going to be asking a lot of your body. And if it's never done that before, it makes it a whole lot harder. So yeah, all these little short races, it's kind of like when you're training for a marathon, doing 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons are really good. For an ultra, you can't really start just banging out 50-mile races because, you know, you're just going to get to breaking point. So it is really good to throw in some of these short, sharp races, but maybe not at the detriment of getting in some of your long runs. Like you're not going to run the West Highland Way on 10K training plan. I'm sure someone has.
So it's been done. But when you did your 2 best West Highland Ways, what was your longest training when building up to it? Can you remember? Roughly.
Probably maybe about 30 or 40 miles.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe I did like the Devil's route. I can't really remember. But now I'd probably, if I'm doing like a 100-mile race, I'd probably go up to a maximum of about 30, 35 miles, maybe a couple of times. I wouldn't do it too much. But, you know, the caveat being I've got a lot of miles already in my legs, so I don't feel like I have to go and do a lot of big long runs. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing the fling as a training run, that's always a good one. Rightly or wrongly, people are kind of, there's a bit of a split opinion on whether doing the fling is a good idea for the West Highland Way. But yeah, I wouldn't do any more than 35, 40 miles. Okay. Maybe the next day a kind of long run and walk out in the hills. It really depends on what kind of base training you have and how many years of endurance you already have in your legs.
Right, yeah. While we mentioned the fling, I'm going to have as a later question, but yes, opinions differ on the fling, but would you subscribe to the theory that doing the fling isn't wrong, it's just the pace you do it at is what's key if you're training for the West Highland Way and putting that in 6-8 weeks beforehand, so recovery can just yeah.
I think again it depends on how long you've been doing and ultra running for. If you're relatively new and you've only got a couple of years and 100 miles, the West Highland Way is your first one, it's probably best that you prioritize one over the other, and what way you do that is really down to your personal choice. I think it'd be quite hard to do your best in both of them, but now if I was doing the fling and the West Highland Way, I would have a good crack at both of them, because I do have that endurance base and I've got a lot of miles in my legs. But if it's your first time, yeah, I think you're probably not going to do best in both of them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to do that next year. So yeah, I mean, okay. I would still have a good crack at the fling. You've still got some time in between, but you would need to really focus on recover, and there's not that much time to fit in more long runs as well. So, you've got to weigh up the pros and cons.
Yeah. Now, we've talked about a lot of first timers in the race this year. There's also a lot of people who've done it before who will be wanting to improve. I mean, you obviously had a dramatic improvement from your first one to your second one, and then another improvement from second to third. Apart from just the overall consistency and the fact you weren't pregnant at the time, was there any key sessions that led to that improvement? Yeah.
No, I remember our dear departed friend John Kinniston. I remember him telling me the West Highland Way is a 2-year plan, and that always stuck in my head. And it's so true. Not necessarily just the West Highland Way, but back then the West Highland Way was the only iconic 100-mile that was around. So, I think any kind of 100-mile race, or even a race that has the same profile as the West Highland Way, I think you're unlikely to give it your best shot on your first time, even though you might run a time or a position that you're super, super pleased with. Genuinely means there's more in there. So, yeah, I mean, a 2-year plan, and I think it was quite right that I came back the second time, or well, it was the third time, but let's say it's the second time that I had a good run at it. Yeah, and I was just really pleased with how that unfolded. It wasn't without its travesties in the middle there, because it's the West Highland Way race, it's not cocktails on the beach. So somewhere in the middle you're going to have some really bad patches, low patches. Everyone does, regardless of where you're on the field. Everyone's going to hit some absolute stinking moments, and you just got to pull yourself out of that. And it's good that there is, it's 100 miles. There's loads of opportunities to you to work through whatever you've got that's going wrong with you, unless it's some detrimental injury. But if it's a fueling or fatigue, or you've got some muscle soreness, there's various things you can do to ride that out. So yeah, and you just learn on the job, to be honest. So I think I learned a lot the first 2 times that I did, and was able to correct them, or know that I can pull myself out of those really dark patches as well. Yeah.
And how important in the West Highland Way, it obviously doesn't happen in every race, but the West Highland Way, a feature that has grown over the years, is just a whole family feel, and having a crew with you on the day to help you get through those bad patches, or not, as the case may be. But how important were the crew to you on your best performances?
Oh, absolutely, so important. Any race, your crew is very, very important. And I know there's a lot of races that I've done now that, crewing is not allowed, and that's great because it makes it fair for everyone. But yeah, having crew on hand, and just, it stops you faffing as well. So if you can tell your crew not to let you sit down, or because time passes like in an instant when you've stopped at any checkpoint. So what you think was like 1 or 2 minutes is actually like 15, 20 minutes. So just have someone to fix drinks for you, give you food, push you out the door, all those things. It just makes everything seamless, and they will come up with things and ideas that you didn't realize that you wanted, or so it's hugely important. They do such a great job.
Yeah.
And especially because they're getting eaten alive by midges. So if you think you're having a hard time, you should try crewing the West Highland Way.
And how do you go about choosing your crew? Any tips to choosing the right crew? I mean, some people would have chosen their crews already. Some will still be thinking about it. Some will be last minute and be making panic phone calls, end of May. What's the perfect crew to have with you?
Anyone who's willing to part with me. No, I always think the best crew is the crew that want it as much as you do. Yeah. So whenever I'm crewing for people, I know in my heart that I want them to succeed as much as they want to succeed. And that's really important.
Let me just stop. I can remember you crewed. There was a dream team, I think 2014 or 2015, when Fiona Ross was running it. And Fiona Ross was Scottish 24-hour record holder, as Debbie has been 24-hour record holder.
I haven't actually, Adrian. I need to correct you there. I've only been
I thought you had it at one point.
You had the 200 record hold and the 100-mile record
between
hold.
you had the 100-mile. Between you, Sharon and Fiona traded those 100-mile and 24-hour.
Yeah, we kind of back and forward on them. Yeah.
But Fiona had Debbie and also Sharon Law, former West Highland Way winner and fellow 24-hour GB team member. What a dream crew that is.
Actually, I did have the 24-hour record. You are absolutely correct, and I've forgotten about it.
Yeah.
So I think we all worked together. We trained together. We were all really close as friends. Sharon and I wanted Fiona to succeed as much as she wanted to. We knew how she operated and what was going to happen if she was having a low point, and working to her strengths. It's really good. It's not necessarily that you have to have crew that you're really close with. It's just someone who's maybe like firm but fair. Even someone who has like an ultra background, or even just knows you as a person. Like I know when I'm crewing, because I do have quite a lot of ultra experiences, I can pull things out the bag that might help someone if they're having a low patch.
Yeah.
I can also be quite mean, and I actually like it when people are mean to me. I use the motto, what goes on the course stays on the course. So I give my runners the carte blanche to do and say whatever they like to me, on the basis that it's just a race. I've been there. So it's always best to have that conversation with your crew beforehand.
So we'll probably chat in detail about this in a later chat nearer the race, which we'll organize, but in terms of race fueling itself. But in terms of training, and in the next sort of 2 or 3 months of training, if you're doing a big weekend, you've always got the 3 elements to training: what you do before your long run, during the long run, and then recovering from the long run. So on Monday, Tuesday, you can go out and hammer yourself again. What tips did you have for people nutrition-wise or just general diet-wise in this next few weeks when they're doing their big mileage or their big training block?
Yeah, I mean, I know sometimes people will try to get down to racing weight towards the race, which is not necessarily a great thing, because you start depriving your body. And in these peak weeks, it's really important that you're fueling before, during, and after, rather than trying to cut calories. And I know, I don't know if you still do that weigh-in thing at the West Highland Way, which thank God you stopped doing that, because that would give people the absolute fear of having to get weighed. I know when I was doing Lakeland and stuff, it was the thing I dreaded the most, stepping on scales. So I don't like stepping on scales. It's really important that you fuel after your long run. Don't leave it too late. I think there's a window of about half an hour up to an hour. Even just getting a pint of milk or some chocolate milk or some kind of recovery shake, because it's really important, because you need to get back at it during the week. I'm not the best when it comes to race fueling, and I'm certainly no expert, but I think you've just got to be eating really good food as well, rather than hitting McDonald's on the way home from your long run.
So it's all good stuff. Now, we've covered a lot about training. We've covered a little bit about diet and other things there. one thing that ultra runners always figures important is your mindset and just what is going to get you to the finish. I've known you several years, Debbie, obviously, and I would say you're not obsessed, but you're pretty driven. I think most people would acknowledge that.
My family would tell you differently.
Yeah, but you don't achieve what you've achieved without having some little inner fire inside to draw on. What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning, basically, just to get up and do the things you need to do?
Yeah, I just, it doesn't mean that I'm like jump out of bed and go, oh, it's raining, I can't wait to go out. So sometimes I do struggle with motivation to get out the door, but I'm always committed to my goals. I always have a goal, and I've always like driven towards that goal. So I think if I didn't have races, like sometimes I don't particularly enjoy racing, but I love training, but I need the races to enjoy the training. So sometimes it's a bit backwards. But yeah, I'm always quite committed. And in terms of mindset, things like the West Highland Way, there is going to be, it's 100 miles, that you're going to have bad patches, and you need to accept that there's going to be bad patches. It doesn't necessarily mean your race is over. It just means that it's something you need to address at that point. But the West Highland Way is a beautiful place, and people can only dream of running the West Highland Way race, and you've got that opportunity to be able to do it. So yeah, I think it's just a privilege to be out there, and sometimes you just need to remind yourself that it is a privilege to be able to run the West Highland Way, and you have signed up for this. Nobody's making you do it. So yeah, it's just a beautiful scenery. So even if you've just got to like stop staring at your feet and look around for a little while, yeah, I think you just need to accept things the way they are, because when your mindset goes, it generally means there's something wrong. And you just need to accept that and address it.
Yeah. Also, I'm reminded of the story that obviously you and I have done a lot of these things over and over again in various sort of different ways. There were a lot of people who just set themselves the goal of the West Highland Way because they've either walked it or they're just Scottish and they just see it as the most iconic sort of trail there is. And for some of them, it's just a once in a lifetime shot. They give themselves a couple of years to train up for it, and they don't want to mess up on the day.
Yeah, but there's so many races that I've done, like you mentioned, like Tour de Géant and Spartathlon and UTMB and all those races. I've only got one shot to do them. I can't just like leave my family and drop of a hat and spend loads of money and going to do it again. So sometimes that is your drive. Like Tour de Géant, I only had one shot to do that, and that was my drive to be able to complete it. It didn't go as well as I would have wanted it to. Never does it? So yeah, sometimes even having that drive, but like the West Highland Way is one of the UK's most premier races. It's probably one of the most iconic races in the UK, and if you've only got one shot to do it, then that's a huge driver.
Almost the attitude that if you're feeling absolutely rubbish when you get to Glencoe and you think, I can't do this. It's a classic phrase you've heard me say at some other team talks, that you're feeling bad now, just think what you're going to feel like on Monday morning thinking you could have done this.
Yeah, you don't want to be standing in that hall when everyone else is going up to get their goblets. You want to be like hobbling up there with your broken, blistered feet, your sore quads, just like everyone else.
Debbie, that practically sums it up. This is what it's all about. For those of you doing your first one, this is one of these little goblets, which is what you are all training for at the moment. So to round it off, Debbie, if you got one absolutely ace bit of advice over and above all the ace bits of advice we've just heard the last 20 minutes or so that you could just offer to everybody.
Oh, I'm going to have to paraphrase and steal one that Ian Beattie gave me way back in the beginning. And he says, when you're running the West Highland Way, you've got to give yourself 3 opportunities to quit. So there's going to come a point. My lowest point is always going into Balmaha. And it's just that you've just come out of the darkness. It's morning. You think you would have that massive burst of energy, but you get to Balmaha and, well, for me, I always feel like really low. Like it's that whole circadian rhythm when your body's saying you should be sleeping. Why are you stuffing your face with flapjacks? And you start to feel really sick. And I always think I'm at Balmaha. It's not even 20 miles and I haven't even, put a dent in this. So that would be my first opportunity where I'm like, I just can't do this. I just don't have it in me. So, you know, if you're going to quit, you've got to give yourself opportunity to quit. And you say that to your crew as well. So if your crew think, well, do you know what, you can't quit here, you need to quit at the next checkpoint. So then whatever's working on it might just be mental, it might be physical, it might be fatigue, you know, you've got that opportunity to work through. So I would say don't shit quit, but Adrian doesn't let me swearing, so I probably have to take that out. But I say that to myself quite often, you know, because there's bits where you just think, I don't want to be here, it's really hard. But when you really, you know, unlayer it and ask yourself some questions, there's probably nothing really that wrong with you. It's just you're having a little moment. So yeah, don't shit quit and give yourself 3 opportunities to quit. I'm sorry for the swearing, Adrian.
That's quite all right. That's thank you so much for all this. It's just some priceless gems of advice from one of the best. So I hope that has inspired everyone listening to this. Thank you so much, Debbie.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm sorry I couldn't actually be there on the night, but as you know, I got my diary a little bit messed up. So
no problem. We're very happy taking the time today. Thank you.
Excellent. I hope everyone enjoys the evening. It was really nice to speak to you both.